Living my bucolic life, free healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello everybody, welcome back. Just wanted to give a quick mention on the Facebook group. I had mentioned that I was going to go and buy a new pattern because I thought they were on sale. Apparently I missed the sale. I got there, they were no longer on sale. So I did not buy them because patterns at full price can be outrageously expensive. So I came back home, looked in my stash, and started looking at my patterns in a new way. Kind of like, why don't I want to make this pattern? At one point, I bought this pattern thinking it was going to be fabulous, and it sits here and I'm not making it. And so what this week is going to be doing is I'm going to be taking a pattern that I have in my stash that I am not overly fond of. When I bought it, there was something about it that I liked, but there's something about it that I don't like. So we're going to make some modifications to make that work. And so we're going to start off with this pattern, okay? What I like about this pattern is, well, there's two different ways. This one is just full princess seams, nice and smooth all the way down. This one, if you can see, it's kind of got these little pocket gathered things in the side areas. I like that. What I do not like is this collar on the top. That collar on the top just seems out of place to me. So I'm going to be modifying the entire neckline and make it so that I can wear it, you know, because if I bought this pattern, I might as well use it. And I'm going to be using some fabrics that I have left over from previous projects. So I have some more of this linen that I made a dress out of a long time ago. Love that dress. It's very nice. I've worn it to weddings and things. I love it. But I have enough of this left over. I can make a lot more dress out of it. And I have some of the navy. This is all linen and it's pre-washed and everything. But I have more of this navy that I also made a dress out of a long time ago, that I'm going to combine these two to give a two-tone look with a totally different neckline and everything. So let me go ahead, turn the camera down, and just give you my ideas of how I'm going to make this work. Okay, so looking at my diagram here, let me see if I can zoom you in a bit. Zooming. Okay, so you can kind of see the front and back here. And I am going to be doing a length probably slightly shorter than what she has. I don't want the little bitty short one, but I don't want it all the way down here. Probably just below my knees is what I'm going to be guessing at. So basically, I want to take off all of this collar. And instead of that, I want to have a nice band that everything is gathered to. So if the side, there's like side panels, because this is a princess seam bodice, I'm not going to have to change those at all. But what I will be needing to change is the sleeves, the front piece, and the back piece, because that all is reaching up to the neckline there, okay? So what I want to do is on the front, I'm going to have it come down in a swoop like this, okay? And in the back, I'm going to have it come like that. So there'll be more skin exposed, but it's going to be more, I think, more romantic that way. This collar just really annoys me. And I might even put some little pretty trim on there. I haven't decided that yet. The other thing is I'm debating on having it button all the way up. I haven't decided on that yet. But what this means is that on the blouse sleeve pieces, the front piece and the back piece, I'm going to have to trim those way back. So what they look like is this, okay? This is a front, this is a back, and this is a sleeve. So basically, if, say, over here, I'm going to measure from my neckline to where I want my band to start at my shoulder, whatever that is, I'm going to have to, well, you can't see that, subtract that off from the top of the sleeve here, okay? And from the back piece, the same. But for the front piece, I want a little bit more skin exposed, okay? I want it to come down slightly, you can't see that, sorry. I want it to come down slightly lower than the front than in the back. You know, nothing too terrible, but you know, we're not going for Puritan here. So if I come down like this, I think that's going to be lovely. So what I'll need to measure is from the base of my neck to that point where I'm comfortable, and then put that here, put this point, the same one that my shoulders are on my sleeve down here, and then blend it together. That's my thought right now. Let me go ahead and get all of my pieces cut out. Because I'm doing all this, obviously I'm not going to have to do collar band and interfacing, which is lovely because that can sometimes be a pain. And just another helpful hint, if you write all over your pattern in your instructions with a heat erasable pen, just iron it and all of it will disappear. So that's fun. Okay, let me get my pattern cut out. I am going to be cutting out my usual size 16, if anyone's curious, and I will be back shortly. Okay, so I'm cutting things out. So I cut out my big bottom, they call it a bottom ruffle. I was under the impression there was a pocket in here that was kind of hidden right there, but there's not. It's just a ruffle. And it's a very, very full ruffle. So I am contemplating of going to this version because if I don't get the benefit of a pocket being stuck in there, and honestly, I don't want to modify this so much that, you know, it's unrecognizable, I think I'm going to skip and do this version. And basically, this just has very, very flared side pieces. So the side front and the side back are really flared. And so, yeah, I'm going to be skipping this, going to this, but still changing that whole ugly neckline. Okay, one more thing I've discovered. They have two different sleeves. There's a sleeve stay, which is the inner sleeve, and it says for A, B, and C. And it has darts in here to hold the position, okay? The outer sleeve is this one, which is just a very big, super wide sleeve that's going to be gathered. And how these sleeves look like they are little balloons, that is because what they're going to have you do is sew the inner sleeve piece to the outer sleeve, so it'll give you that balloon look, very big in the 80s. And I actually did a sleeve very similar to this last year when I made this little very colorful cocktail dress, which I love. But I can tell you, having that very tight inner sleeve makes it not quite as comfy as I would hope. So, because of that, I'm going to be skipping the inner sleeve piece and just making a regular outer sleeve. This is extremely flared and lovely, so there's no problem with that, but just, you know, by the time this is done, will it even look like the pattern envelope? Well, I hope not, you know, but anyway. Just letting you know that little inner sleeve is going back in the envelope. This is the one I am cutting out. Okay, so before I do too much, I need to figure out my finished length that I want. And if I look at the longer version, which is C, might come down here at my size. That's width, finish length for my size is 50 3/4 inches. So I'm going to stick my little clothespin at 50 3/4 inches, hold this up to the back of the base of my neck and see where it falls, and that'll give me an idea of how much I need to take off to get to the size that I want. Okay, and so by doing that, basically what I do is up where I'm holding at the base of my neck, I just keep raising or lowering my hand down until I hit the point where this is where I want it to be. And I need to take 11 inches off of the bottom. So let me write that down before I forget, because my battery is about to die on this camera, so I'm going to need to switch that out. So there you go. And on the bottoms of all of my skirt pieces, I am going to just measure up from the bottom edge to where 11 inches is. Like right here, move it over a little more, right here, and so on and so forth, and just cut that off. Actually, I can see that that is 3 inches from the view A cut line. That might be easier for me to watch. But that's the point. I'm just going to make those marks all the way across on my bodice. Well, not my bodice, my entire dress, front, back, and both side panels, cutting off the 11 inches. All right, so what I want to show you is that I am backing out to a normal range. Okay. What I wanted to show you is when you're cutting out your front piece, it is extra wide because it does have that facing built in here for your buttons to go on. But the upper bullseye is supposed to be where the fullest point of your bust is. This is a princess seam. It doesn't have a dart, so I'm not going to worry about adjusting where that's supposed to be. But if you take a look, these are the first column is the sizes. The second column is the measurement in inches, which I'm more used to. So I can see that for size 16, it's giving a 45-inch finished width at the bust, which is plenty. But what I also wanted to show is down here at the waistline. For my size, it has a 37-inch waist. So this is not going to be a fitted garment. So even though they don't have a model wearing this, be aware that this is not designed to be a very tight princess dress all the way down, okay? It's going to be more loose, which is fine. If you wanted to make it more fitting, these are multi-sized patterns, so like say for example, if I want to take 4 inches out of my waist, I would need to divide that 4 inches by the number of seams that there's going to be. So it's between the front and side front, between the sides, and between the side back and back. So that's 3 seams on each side, so 6 seams total. Take the 4 inches I want, divide it by 6, and then divide that again by 2 because there's 2 sides for each one, and that's how much you would need to take off, and then blend it in, and that's way too much math information, and we will do that on another video. But for right now, I just wanted you to be aware that this is not supposed to be a very tight fitted waistline, which if you are more of an apple shape or a rectangle shape or something, this might work out well for you, you know. If you wanted a princess seam dress and you didn't want to have to worry about trying to take that hourglass look and spread it out, this pattern might actually work for you. So the other thing is I need to go ahead and get a couple measurements off of my body. So I'm just going to hold this up, stand in front of the mirror, figure out how long from, you know, the base of my neck, that jewel line, if you have a little choker necklace at your jewel line, from that center point down, how long I want an opening in the front and the shoulders and the back of my neck. Okay, so this is going to seem dramatic, but what I want is for my neckline to be 6 inches lower. Okay, so understanding that they have a seam allowance built in, and I'm going to need a seam allowance down here, I'm just doing a straight 6 inches. So from this neckline area, I'm just going to draw a line all the way across this whole facing, okay, because that needs to be pretty straight right here. Then at the very top of my shoulder, I want it to be 2 inches, okay, and so that is the very center of my sleeve piece. But I'm going to blend it down a bit in the front, so that I can make this not as extreme here. So I'm going to take this piece here, okay, where my sleeve is going to be sewed on, and mark that at 3 inches, okay? So then I have these 2 points here. So I'm going to take my flexible ruler just because I like it, and I'm just trying to come up with a nice neckline that's going to blend from this point to this point right here. And I think that looks pretty good, you know. So that's good. So at this point, which is, oh no, I think I'm out of ink, 5/8 of an inch in. All right, I want to make sure that I have an accurate measurement there, and that is actually 3 1/8 inches. So when I go over to my sleeve piece, I'm going to make sure I start my front modification at 3 1/8 inch. So here's my sleeve. Now the side that has 1 notch is the front, the side that has 2 notches is the back. I'm worrying about the front right now. So what I'm going to do is, just so I can make sure everything's right, I am laying up this little piece that I cut off of my front piece up here, so everything is matching up here and here, and just drawing a line to this point here, which is 5/8 of an inch in. Right there is 5/8 in, okay? So I need to make sure at this point things are matching up, all right? This is the point, right there where that X is, okay? Now, up here at the shoulder, I want it to blend to 2 inches. So I'm just putting my ruler at 2 inches, lining up with these center dots, okay? And then over here on the back, I also want it at 2 inches, right here, okay? So basically, these 2 points are pretty much going to be, you know, a regular curve, and this is coming down slightly like that. And I might as well draw that in. I think I'm running out of ink and all of my pens at once. I've got tons of refills. If you're ever interested and you're going to buy these things, I just get the generic pens. And in my Amazon link, it'll take you to a search page, and there'll be like a bunch of them. And I think they all use the same factory. They just market them different. But I usually get the pack that comes with, like, you know, 50 to 100 refills, because they do use up fairly quickly. And you just pull the little protective top off, stick it in here, and come on, stick it in there, and you're ready to go. Okay, so that is how my piece looks, and I actually wadded this up and threw it away, so I'll pull it out of the trash again. Okay, so I cut that off the sleeve. Now I'm going to go ahead and do my back piece. So again, if I take my little scrap, I cut off my sleeve, put it up here to where it would be sewn on, and I'm just going to put a little mark here at where my cut edge is, but I'm also going to put a little X where 5/8 inch is, okay? Because this is where my seam line is going to be. That's the point I need to make sure it matches. So in case you wanted a, you know, higher neckline or whatever, you could do that too. I'm just going to keep it at that 2 inch mark. And since I'm doing that, I'm just going to put one more mark about midway, and then just take this straight across, following those little marks I just drew. And there we go. Okay, so I'm going to throw these away because I am never going to use that other version of this dress. I am going to have to come up with a different way, obviously, to deal with this upper edge. I haven't decided yet if it's going to be a bias tape or a facing tape or an elastic or whatever. I will deal with that when the time comes. The side panel pieces, I'm not going to really modify anything on those except for the length, obviously. I cut the length off. But what I'm thinking is the more I get into this, the more romantic-ish this dress is feeling and the less like this type of fabric it should be. You know, I do love this, but it just doesn't feel right for this dress. So I'm going to go back into my little stash closet and see what I can find, and I will be right back. Okay, highly unorthodox, but we are going with flannel. I love this. This is one of those platitude ones that they have at Joann, and it's a woven. You know, sometimes flannels are just printed on, but this is an actual woven in pattern, and I just, the feel of it is really, really nice. I have pre-washed it, as you can see. I have this piece and I have one other 1 yard piece, and I think I'm going to be fine for cutting this out, even though the pattern technically calls for a whole lot more fabric. They're dealing with larger pieces, and I've cut more off the bottom and things like that. So we're just going to hope for the best. I'm going to get started laying out my pattern, and we'll see how far I can get. Okay, so I am going to get started cutting this out now. One of the things is now I have a plaid, so now we have the issue of matching plaids, which can be a bit tedious, but I think we'll be okay. One of the nice things about shortening my dress is that I can fit it widthwise. And this plaid, it is the same in all directions. You know, the way the plaid repeats, it's uniform. So I don't have to be particularly careful about making sure one piece is like that and that, which will really help because matching plaids usually takes up a lot of extra space. So just so that you see down here, this is my center front piece. This is actually going to be cut open, but I am lining it up right on the fold. And this fold is at the center point of one of these brown squares. And so by folding it at that center point and trying to make sure that everything lines up down here, because this is kind of a very soft and looser weave, everything should match up. So once again, putting this down here, I have chosen to put my bottom of my piece along this edge, the bottom edge or the last strand of this like peach colored weave line. I'm going to make that the standard for the bottom line of my dress. Now, because this is a princess seam dress and we have all kinds of curves going on up there, there's a really good chance the plaids won't match up near the top. But if I can keep the sides kind of matching, that's my goal. I wanted to show you, this is my front piece. I just have kind of upside down here. I am going to be, you know, down at the skirt level, trying to make it so that these lines match going across. Once you get up here, you know, weird things can happen. I am not too concerned on making like this hit in the exact same spot, like moving it so it's like that or something, because there's just too many variables involved, and honestly I don't have enough fabric to be that precise. But if this is my front, I am coming down here. Let's see if I can move you a bit. Okay, coming down here and just kind of placing this piece. This is the side that I will be sewing my side. Hang on, I'm just trying to get this lined up. My side front to. So I'm just wanting to make sure that I have it marked that at that point where that pin is where the corner here is going to line up to, because that's the corner that's going to get sewn on. Okay, and I need to make sure that this grid line is staying pretty true, and I can very faintly see that plaid underneath. So it looks like that is straight of grain-ish. Ooh, I am way over the edge. Hang on a second. I need to move this over. I know you did not see that, but just trust me here for a minute. Okay, that looks pretty good. So if I put a weight here, and now I can move you so you can see that just barely fits there. And I'm just cutting one. I will have to get my second piece of fabric to cut the second one. and cut up and all the way around this piece. Okay, so I have one of these cut out. I need two of them cut out. So once again, let me loosen you up. What I'm going to do is take this and place it on top of my plaid fabric here so that everything matches up exactly. Okay, if you can see how I'm starting that so it'll match up. Once I have that matching, I'll put a few pins in it and then cut around here, and then I should have two exact side front pieces. So I'm on my side back piece. It's a lot of the same, making sure my bottom starting point is going to match up where my front or my corresponding side is going to be. So right about here, okay? And so while holding this little pin there, I'm going to make sure that my straight of grain here is actually straight. And then go ahead and anchor that pin in. And I've got this folded double, you know. Lots of just taking your time and getting the flannel to lay right, because that can be a very tricky part of all of this. So I'm just going to go ahead, continue on. After this, it's just that back piece. And then the sleeves, of course, I'm not going to worry about matching those up. They are what they are. Okay, so I want you to see my pattern. For the amount of fabric I have left, which is basically what you see, and yes, I could piece some on the sides, and I haven't decided if I'm doing that or not. I am about 6 inches too narrow. I would need 2 8-inch wide strips, and I don't think I have that. This is all I have left. So I'm going to modify the sleeve pattern to fit what I have here. And so up here at the top, I'm not beyond taking some of that out, but I don't think I need it to be quite as flared as it is. So let me tell you what I'm going to do. First, I'm just going to lay it here on my grid so we can see the straight of grain is lined up there. And stick a weight up here at the top. Way up at the top. All right, I'm going to make a few slices here. The first one coming straight up, this straight of grain arrow. Oh, to within about 1/2 inch or so of the top up there. Okay, I just want to keep it so it's flexible. And if with this here, keeping that on that grid line, I'm going to go ahead and do one more right here, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 inches away on this grid line here, or thereabouts. Oh my goodness, look at me making a mess of it. Right about there, and over here about 4 inches out, which is going to put it right about here, and cut it up. Not precise cutting work, obviously. For some reason, I'm just being that way today. Okay, so with it cut this way, I'm going to set this aside and get my fabric laid out so I can use it to match up to my pattern. Okay, so I've got my selvage over here, my fold over there. This is kind of the top, the bottom's kind of staggered down here. All right. And I am going to place my pattern so that that center slit is on the grain line. And that is all I am worried about right now. I'm just going to smush these two in here. So if I have it so that my very top is laying flat, and this is on the grain line here, pretty much. That's pretty good. Now I can just overlap these until my sides can fit. So I'm going to bring this in a little more. I have my fabric is running out up there. I may have to flip it over because it's a little bit higher on this side. So sometimes you just have to do these things, you know? So actually I'm going to start it here where I know this needs to be, right here. Give me a weight. Yes. And I'm going to these guys out of the way and put this side over here where it needs to be if this top is behaving. I'm going to have to bring this top in just a little bit. There is no way around that. So I'm going to pinch this up here and bring it in 1 inch. 1 inch is making a 1/2 inch fold, okay? If I make that 1/2 inch fold, then I should be able to get it to fit better. And that would be gathered anyway up there, so that's not a big deal. Okay, so putting this back down, so this part here is fairly straight, because remember that was on the straight of grain there. And can I bring this one in now to make it fit? We can always make it fit, you know? And that is plenty wide down here at the bottom, okay? I think that that's gonna work. Let me grab a couple other weights. Just setting this here. Now I'm gonna try to average these guys out just a hair. They're not gonna want to because of that up at the top. So we are going to totally make do here, as you do. Fold, putting some pins around here. And then when I go to cut the bottom, it's gonna be important to me that this width is correct and that width is correct. But everything else in between is going to kind of be blended together. So many pins, okay. So just gonna put this here, and this is at the very edge over there. So just for cutting the bottom, if I start it here, I can come this way, blending it until I am here. Okay, so that's my new bottom. The rest of this up there, I am just going to cut all the way around. And you can see I still have just about the same shape of a top of my sleeve. It's only 1 inch narrower, but like I said, that's going to be all gathered up there, so that really doesn't make that much of a difference. So you may be thinking to yourself, well, it's June, why are you making a flannel dress? And I'm saying, but it is shorter. It is 100% cotton, very soft, and it will have a lower neckline. And here's the thing, this is just my opinion, of course, as a whatever age person I am. Having that slower neckline, it's like a ventilation system, you know? It just seems to breathe better that way. So I am all for having a little bit more skin going there, just so the heat can go away, you know what I mean? And in the winter, if I was wearing this in fall and winter, oh my goodness, all the fabulous scarf combinations that can go with this. So anyhow, that's my 2 cents about that. Next step is to go ahead and get started putting it together. So I took a break for a while. I'm back up here, and before I get started, I want to think out my final look on this dress. And if you can see, probably need to turn on a brighter light somewhere, but there's a fabulous selvage edge on here. Let me grab my light. Hang on. Okay, if you can see that selvage edge, I really like that. And I kind of want to use that in the edging, possibly around the edge of the sleeve, but I'm not too sure. But I also have a lot of this really beautiful lace, and I'm thinking of trimming off a couple of the rows here. It's so light and so delicate, and that really, really light, really, really delicate, along with my more earthy kind of flannel, I like that. But I think that this is a little too light, so what I'm thinking right now, you know, while I'm still in the early days of all of this, is cutting 2 strips of this, and this is 60 inches wide, so that'll give me 120 inches, which is going to be more than enough for that bottom edge. And then doing a really quick tea stain or something on it, just to see if I can take some of the ivory shine off of it, and I think that that will blend better with this. So let me go ahead and get those cut. so that they can go downstairs and be dyeing, and then we'll get started on our dress. Okay, so before I actually get started, I need to think about what I'm going to do up here, because a lot of the beginning instructions are going to be for like gathering this to attach to that collar, which obviously is not there. And so what I am thinking is I'm going to go ahead and put the button band, but I'm going to be doing this slightly different, but still using their markings here, okay? What I need to do is pay attention to where these two darts are, because for the princess seams, I'm going to need to put a row of stay stitching right here to keep it from wanting to stretch out of sorts. And because of what I'm doing is a little bit different, I'm going to go ahead and put stay stitching up here around this curve too, just so this does not get out of sorts also. So with all of that being said, I'm actually not going to mark these yet. I'm going to take the pattern off and go over to my sewing machines, and I will be serging all the way around this piece, actually every piece on this project, to make sure it's not going to fray. Okay, after I get done serging the edges, I'm going to come back, mark where these two notches are, and at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, just put a row of straight stitching there. That way it won't show up when your final stitches are put in place, because that's going to be slightly, you know, bigger. And the same thing up here, I'm going to put a row of stay stitching from a 1/2 inch seam allowance from here all the way down to the edge. Okay, so those three things: serging, stay stitch, and stay stitch on both of these front pieces, and I will be back. Okay, so I have it serged and I've stay stitched my collar area, and I am just coming back and marking with a pen where these notches are so that I can see that. I don't really want to clip into this because this wants to fray a lot, and I want it to stay very sound. But if you can see, I just put those little marks on, and then when I iron it, they'll disappear. But stay stitching between those two. All right, so what I'm going to do now is make that first turn, which is the one that's going to be along their line here that says interfacing. I am not putting interfacing in. Well, actually, no, I take that back. I am, but not the kind that they would normally say. Okay, so if you can see, beautiful fabric. It's fairly thick, but it wants to move all over the place. Those threads are not terribly stable. Before I actually fold and press anything, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 2-inch, this is a fusible woven 2-inch interfacing strip. Okay, and on both of my front pieces, I'm just going to fuse that up here at the very edge. And that way when I do fold it, I'll have a double layer going on. Okay, so let me go ahead and get that ironed on, and I'll be right back. Okay, so they want you to go ahead and fold and everything, that front part, and I'm going to hold off on that because I'm doing different things up here. So we're just going to say goodbye to this entire sheet of instructions and go on to page 3 of 4. And what we need to do next is get our back piece, and I'm going to do the same thing before I do anything. Is just serge all the way around my back piece. And they have you putting gathering threads across the back. I'm not doing that right now, but I will be doing the stay stitching, okay? And the stay stitching goes from right where the sleeve comes all the way down to where the waistband is. So let me get that piece and I'll show you where that is. So on this back piece here, this is cut on a fold, so it's one big piece, but the stay stitching is going to go at a 1/2 inch seam allowance from way up here all the way down to the waistband or waistline. The waistline is marked by this little word right there. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw that line like I did before on about both sides here. So when I get over to my sewing machine, I can see where to stop. Okay, so let me get this serged around and that row of stay stitching on. Don't know if you can see, but there's my stay stitching row there. So this is my back piece. all serged, stay stitched. I'm going to set it aside now. And basically, I need to go through that same process with my side pieces. I don't believe there's any stay stitching on these. It's just serging. So let me get that done, and then we're going to start assembling it. Hello and welcome back. So to you, it's been a moment. For me, it's actually been a few days. So I need to figure out where I left off and get back into this. But I wanted to show you how that lace turned out. Just threw it in some tea briefly and then washed it. And I think that that's really, really fun, you know. It gives it a little bit of extra pizzazz. I love lace. Why not? If you don't love lace, you don't have to put it on your outfit, but I can definitely put it on mine. So I believe that where I left off is that I'm going to need to sew my side panels onto my front and back panels. And I do have my stay stitching here. This is my back piece. So I'm going to go ahead and get my side backs, which are already serged, and bring them over here. So because my little notch markings are quite hidden, I am just sticking a pin, this is my center back, right in between these double notches here, because that's going to help me match it up to my side back pieces here. And there is the double notch that I need to match up. So I'm going to do the same thing for my side back pieces, just stick a little pin right here on both of them. Okay, so now I'm just going to put them right sides together and pin it where those two meet. And if I stick my pin about 5/8 of an inch in at the top of that plaid, I'm just going to open it up and see how close I came to matching. Well, kind of. That's up here at the top where it starts to curve for a princess seam. It can be a little trickier. So let's take a look down here at the bottom. I'm keeping that pinned just because that's a landmark. And down here, hopefully, we'll have a close match. So if I line these up, it looks like they are coming together quite well. I'm just going to put a couple pins and throwing them around apparently. Going down the stitching line at about 5/8 of an inch just to see how that looks. And I think that's pretty darn good as far as I wanted to keep the stripes this way working well. So let me finish pinning this all the way up, trying to make sure that if I have to like ease it one way or another to make that stripe fit a little bit better, I can do that. Okay, so I have it pinned all the way up, and I want to show you what I mean. This is about the waist point, and it should be pretty straight up to that point. And the front is even going to be more skewed than this, so, you know, just beware. Up here, where this princess seam starts to curve, it starts to kind of morph things a little bit. It's still pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's still pretty good. That's what I'm going to do for the other side over here, and then come back and along the 5/8 inch seam allowance line, I will be stitching it and then pressing that seam allowance open the entire way. Today I am using Juliet, one of my first machines that I honestly tried to paint and everything, and I think that she's just fun. She's a tiny little 99 from the 1920s. And on my other channel, I just got done working on a little Spartan, which is basically the same size. They're like 3/4 size machines. And I just thought I'd get her out because I haven't sewed with her in a while. So since this is kind of a lightweight cottony fabric, I think that she'll handle it well. They got a pretty substantial little frame in, even if it's a heavier fabric. So anyhow, that's what we're using today. Okay, so this is my back piece after I have pressed those seam allowances, and I can tell you this is a very wide dress. It is not a form-fitting dress, okay? But up here you can kind of see what I'm talking about, where they're not going to line up exactly once you have curves. But from that waistline pretty much down, it's a straight line, and they match up pretty well. So I need to put this away and grab a front piece. Remember, there's two fronts, you know, because they button up the middle. So grab a front piece and a side front, and I'll be right back. So on the front of princess seam dresses, there's usually two darts you need to be concerned with. And most of the easing happens between those two darts. So just like the back, I am marking them with a pin. So this is one of my front pieces. Remember, it does have a little bit of interfacing going down the front. And let me grab a side front piece. And I'm going to do the same thing, putting a little pin where those two notches are so that I can match them up. Okay, so here's these two pins, those two pins. Remember, there's stay stitching here. This is a very pliable fabric, but a lot of times you're going to need to clip this side over here, which is the front. This is the side front. And I'm going to go ahead and do that like every 1.5 inches or so. I'm just putting a little notch between these two darts here. Not very deep, maybe 3/8 of an inch deep. I don't want to come anywhere near my stitching line, but I want to be able to open that up and flex it, okay? So with right sides together, matching up these two pins down here, taking that out, and these two up here first, okay? And then I'm just going to go ahead and pin the top. And I'm pinning it long ways, kind of like pin basting. I find that when I'm trying to match plaids, that's a lot easier. Okay, so now that these two are here, if you can see, having that clipped, well, on this one, it's a very easy going kind of princess seam. Sometimes they're very extreme, and clipping it really makes a big difference. On this, maybe not so much. You know what, I need to flip it back over because I'm looking at this side. But I want to put my raw edges together here. And again, I am pinning it at approximately that 5/8 of an inch in position. Okay, the clips are helping. I suggest the clips. All right, now taking these out and putting them along that line also. Let's see what that's gonna look like. Well, not terrible. It is what it is, but not terrible, okay. All right, so with this all done up there, I'm skipping way down to the bottom, and I'm gonna try to keep an eye on my plaids down here. So, there you go. Then come to the next one and I kind of open it up and get a sneak peek of the bottom layer and try to match it up, like so. Skip one, come up here. And about halfway, right about there. Okay, so if I open this up, how does that look? Well, that looks pretty good. So, just like the back, I'm going to go ahead and stitch this at 5/8 of an inch all the way up, and then come back and press that seam allowance open, and I'm going to do that for both of my front pieces, the right front and the left front. I am pressing my front, and I wanted to point out the whole point of this whole princess seam thing is to work a nice round curved front here. So I highly recommend pressing it on something round so that you don't, you know, flatten out all the curve that we're working so hard to get on here. So I like to use hams. If you don't have a ham, use like the top corner of your ironing board or something, but something so that you're going to be able to keep that curve worked in, okay? So this is my front piece here, and it is time to sew the back onto the front. So putting right sides together and doing my best to kind of match my plaids as I go down here. It looks like I need to adjust it so that I have maybe about a fat 1/4 inch showing right here. To me, it's better to have that little gap there and have all my plaids match up than the other way around. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this together. There are no pockets on this dress, just it is what it is. Sew this side seam at 5/8 of an inch and then press it open. Okay, so I have it all sewed together. All my seam allowance is pressed open. As mentioned, I think before, the pattern's going to call for gathering stitches up here and here and here. At this point, I'm not putting them in. I'm thinking of another option for that. So I'm going to set this whole thing aside because I need to get started with the sleeves. This is my sleeve pattern, as you saw before. It looks nothing like, it looks nothing like the original pattern. But I am going to serge all the way around this first, but I want to keep track of which is the back and which is the front. And you can tell this really, really long one here has the double notches, so that is the back. This shorter one here with a single notch is the front. So just so I can keep everything straight for right now, I am just going to stick one of my big flower head pins in the back piece of both of these while I take it over to the serger and go around the edges. Okay, so once again, straying from the pattern, they have gathering stitches at the top and the bottom, because remember they did that whole balloon kind of thing with the sleeve, which I am not doing. So no gathers at the bottom, none at the top, no pleats on an undersleeve, which I am not doing. So I am skipping all the way down to sew the seam together. And I want to make sure, because I don't have a right side and a wrong side of my fabric, I want to make sure that I end up with 2 different ones. So I'm going to fold this so that I have my back piece on top here, and fold it this way so I have my back piece on top here, and that way I'll make sure I have 2 opposite sleeves. So I'm going to sew it straight down here at 5/8 of an inch and then press that seam allowance open. Okay, so I've got that. Now I just wanted to point out before anyone else does, no, they don't match here. But when I was cutting out my pattern, I was more focused on making sure my straight of grain was matching up with the pattern's straight of grain. For whatever reason, I know I altered the pattern a lot, but that means that this was not completely square. And that's fine with me because this is basically my underarm. And by the time I put a hem on it, it's not that long. And if anyone is staring that closely at my underarm, they have bigger problems than I do, you know? So I'm going to turn the sleeve right side out. Put this one aside here for a minute. My pin, where are you, pin? Well, somewhere around here is my pin. Did I lose it? I might have. Well, if you remember the longer one here, that was the back side. So I'm just gonna put a new pin here, indicating that that is my back, and get my garment over here. And if I place my dress wrong side up, okay, this is a front and this is a back. That's the wrong sleeve because that has a back on this side. So let me get this one flipped right side out and set it here. So yes, this has a back on this side, this is a back, that's the right sleeve for this side. So I'm going to flop it down there. I can take this out now and start up by matching this seam down here. Okay, and then come up here, and yes, I know that there are dots and notches on here. I'm actually going to kind of just go without them because it should match up exactly, so I'm not going to stress about that too much. Okay, so let me get this pinned on all of the way around, And then I'm going to be stitching this at 5/8 of an inch, from up here all the way down around to up there. Now I have this sewn on once, and the pattern is going to ask you to sew it twice, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. So here's my first row of stitching at 5/8. I'm going to go inside of that about another 1/8 of an inch, so about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and do a second row of stitching all the way around. Okay, so with the sleeves put on, it is time to deal with this top, because what my top is going to end up looking like is very different from what the patterns is, obviously. And I think what I'm going to be doing is doing a very thin elastic casing around it, because instead of gathers, I think that will give it a little bit of softness, but keep it in close to my skin enough that it won't be gaping out. And as you can see, this is just half of it from this point here over. That's just half of the neckline. So it's very large. What I am going to be doing is they want you to make this front opening by basically folding this. There's a fold line on the pattern. It's about 1¼ inch in. Making a little stitch up here and then flipping it right side out, okay? I'm going to kind of go along with that, but I'm not going to do it yet. In the pattern, they've had you do all that way before, I know. What I'm going to be using is I have some brown single fold bias tape here. It's darker, but it'll work. And I'm kind of upset with myself that I did that stay stitching line there, but I don't think it's going to cause that much grief. Because this very beginning part here is going to be folded in like this, I'm not actually going to be starting my bias tape until I'm going to stick a little pin so I can measure it. Well, it's basically after this. So this interfacing tape was 2 inches. That's my roll of stuff here. And I'm going to start my bias tape right after that. Now on a bias tape, one side is folded in slightly more than the other. For what I'm doing, it's not really going to matter which side, but if you can see, this side is folded in deeper than that side. Okay, I'm just going to arbitrarily choose, because when I'm sitting at my sewing machine, it'll be easier to start here. And I'm going to be sewing it on the right side of my fabric. So I'm going to open this up, one of these sides, and lay it so that the raw edge of my bias tape is equal with the raw edge of my fabric. So I'm starting it here, okay, so it's right about where that is, but this is the wrong side, this is the right side. I'll just put a pin there to get it started. And I'm going to be stitching in this little crease right here. Oh, let me turn this light, maybe this will help. Okay, if you can see, that's a lot better. There's a little crease here where that fold is on the bias tape. I'm going to be stitching in that, but I'm not going to pin it all ahead of time. I'm just going to kind of move it and attach it as I go, making sure my seam allowances are going the way I want them to. And actually, that reminds me, where these sleeve ones are, they want these sleeve seam allowances to go towards the sleeve. So here's my front going towards the shoulder, my back going towards the shoulder. But that's going to be a whole lot of stuff inside of a casing, okay? So I am actually going to clip out a good chunk of this seam allowance. If I use my pinking shears here and come down, about 1 inch or so, and I'm basically cutting where that second row of stitching is, like that, all right? So when I go to make my little casing, I only have that much stuff inside of it instead of all of this. I'm going to do that for all of my seam allowances. So 2 on one side, 2 on the other that are going with my sleeve. Let me go ahead, get that trimmed, get this sewn on, and as I sew it, as I'm working it through the machine, what works for me is, so this is curved, okay? Instead of trying to pull this around to match the curve, it's easier for me as I'm sewing to pull the fabric over and match the straight. it works out the same, whatever works for you, but that works well for me. Let me do that and I'll be right back. And for all my sewing kitty lovers, here's Midna doing what she does best, which is keep me company while I'm sewing. And right now she's behaving. Earlier she decided it was time to get over here and stand on top of the dress while I was working on it, but right now she's behaving herself. Say hi, Midna. Okay, so I've got that sewn on. Hope you can see. That's what I'm talking about there. And the seam allowances, you can see I've cut a bunch off, but making sure that as I'm sewing them, that what little is left of those sleeves, seam allowances are going towards the sleeve, okay? So the way that I'm gonna work this is I don't want my bias tape to be visible on the outside. And so I'm gonna be using a fairly narrow elastic, but I still have 1-inch casing here. So what I'm doing is I'm folding it in completely, and I'm folding it enough that I see just a hint of that outside fabric up there. And I'm just gonna pin it, you know, every few inches or so. Let's see, up here at where this sleeve is, bring it in, okay, just like that, all the way across. And once I have it all pinned, then I'm going to come back and edge stitch it about 1/16 of an inch in all the way down here. But it's going to be leaving these beginning and ending open, okay? But here's the thing. Before I actually sew this all the way down, all the way across, I'm going to deal with this corner. I'm not going to worry about the entire thing, but I'm just going to deal with where I want this final fold to be. So let me grab that pattern piece so I can show you the fold line I'm talking about. Okay, so on the pattern, it's outside edge, then the first line that says interfacing, and then the second line, I cut it off. I think it's front facing is what that says. Basically, what I need to do is looking at the right side of my garment. This first line is, if I put this up onto my plaid, I can see it better and use my plaid as a guideline since I cut this out on the straight. It's about 1.25 inches, but where this line hits is right at this point in my plaid pattern, okay? So I'm going to fold it and press it with my little bias tape. I could not remember the word. Bias tape sticking out like that. And press it down. I'm only going to do that just a little bit, just because I only want to deal with this upper part. I can deal with all of that afterwards, okay? So I'm going to stick a pin here and stick a pin here. Okay. Okay, so with my bias tape up, you can see where it was sewn on. I want the stitching line going across the top here to be at that same level. So let me grab something to draw with. So basically, I'm going to be making that my stitching line, okay? And remember, this is serged here, so that's not going to unravel. So once I sew this, I should be able to flip it and everything's going to be at the same level here, okay? So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, folding that end in, and like I said, I'm not dealing with all of this right now, just up here at the top, and making that little stitch. Okay, so there's my little stitching, and I'll clip that thread in a second. I'm actually going to take just a little bit of bulk out of this corner, not a whole lot, and turn the whole thing right side out. Actually, I'm going to clip this little corner here so that doesn't peek out. All right, get my handy dandy knitting needle to get that little corner poked out. All right, so now this is what it looks like here. I'm going to pin it so that everything's coming down the right place. When I'm stitching the edge, oops, I need to turn off my music. When I'm stitching the edge of with my bias tape. I'm going to open this up and stitch it this way. I'm not stitching this closed because I want to be able to get in here and access the very end of it, okay? So starting here, you know, with everything folded down the same manner, the bias tape should curve nicely so I can get a nice flat edge right here. Okay, so I've got that stitched on. I ran out of bobbin halfway and have to deal with that, but we are all good. And I went ahead and I pressed my whole front band. Okay, so it's just pressed under at this point. But I have a idea of, you know, the final shape, and that was my bobbin freaking out when it was about to go empty, but we're just going to ignore that right now. I am going to be using 1/4 inch elastic, and I'm not sure exactly how much I'm going to need, so I am going to cut a length of about 40 inches. That should be way more than plenty. And grab my bodkin. Okay, so this is my bodkin. I'm just going to pop my elastic on it and start threading it through. My plan is to get it pulled through with the ends hanging out and then put it onto my dress form, cinch in the elastic, and, you know, just keep playing with it until it looks right, I guess. So for right now, I'm just going to feed this through until I have a little bit hanging out on this side and the same on the other. Okay, so I've got it fed through. I'm going to go ahead and pop this onto my dress form so you can see what it looks like once I have pulled in my elastic, what I feel is the appropriate amount on each side. Okay, so this is what she's looking like. It looks very comfortable to me, not gonna lie. I just have these pins here holding my little elastic that's tucked inside there at a place where I feel comfortable with it. Just a few pins on the front so we can see how it's lining up. And over the shoulder, we have a little bit of elastic. Once this washes, throw it in the washer and dryer, that bias tape is gonna soften up a bit, so it's gonna gather up there even softer, I'm hoping. But just to show you, this is the back here, which is looking cute, you know, just a basic little dress. But this is such wonderful flannel. I'm really happy with it, and I think that the plaid is actually working out really well. So I'm gonna go ahead, take this off the dress form, stitch this elastic into place so it's not going to want to come free, and then I'll work on that front area. Well, the battery on my little camera light is dead, so I can't turn that on, but I wanted to show you how I'm going to be dealing with this elastic. Basically, I still have it pinned right here, so it's not going anywhere. I'm just going to clip it off, fold this in, okay, and I am going to be edge stitching this entire way down. All right, so that it's going to look like I have a row of stitching coming down here. But that row of stitching is going to lock in that little bit of elastic, okay? And so if I'm looking at the front here, comparing it to where my edge is on the back, okay, I want my stitching to be in maybe at least 1/8 of an inch, probably closer to 1/4 inch. So right about here, okay? So what I'm going to do is just kind of follow this blue line all the way down and edge stitch it here, all the way down, and that's going to lock in the little piece of elastic on this side. And then I'll do the same thing for the other side, and then I can pull this pin out after I have it stitched in place. I wanted to show you going down one way is easy, but you always want to start at the neck and come down. You don't want to go from the bottom up on this seam here. And so unfortunately, at least for me and for my machine, I have to actually shove my whole dress inside here to make it work because it's a small machine, but you know, that's okay. But the other thing I wanted to show you, and I don't have my tripod here, I'm just kind of chilling with my cat, is if you can see, it looks like it's a little bit bumpy right there. The best thing to do is on this side, hold your fingers that way, and I should have gotten my tripod. At the same time, put your fingers over here this way and kind of stretch it out. And you can see if you're stretching the fabric apart like that. It's going to lay a lot flatter as you sew over it, okay? So that is my 2 bits of advice about that whole process, and I'll be done here in a minute and be back at the table. Okay, so it's about time to start working on that hem, but before I do, I have 2 pieces of lace that I need to combine into one piece. So I am just laying them one over the other and matching up a motif so I can stitch straight down the center of it, okay? And then I'll have one long piece that should give me enough to do the entire bottom of the hem and maybe the sleeves, but I'm not sure yet. Okay, so I've got it sewn together, my seam allowance is pressed open, so on the outside that looks pretty good to me. So I am pleased with that. So laying my hem down, this is one of my center front edges here. This is my thought right now. Now on this lace there is a right side and a wrong side. That's the right side. You can kind of see the embroidery threads a little more. That's the wrong side. So I'm going to lay it right sides together, and it has this little selvage that I'm going to turn in twice like that and lay that selvage so it is in line with my folded edge up here. And where my lace goes like this, the high point here is where I'm going to match up with the raw edge. So let me get a couple pins here before everything wants to unfold on itself. And yeah, I'm going to have quite a bit of lace showing around the bottom, but I want to. And if that is not your cup of tea, that is fine. You know, that's the beauty of sewing your own garment. You can make it exactly how you want to. So when I get over here to where this side or center front to side front is, let me make sure and pin that seam allowance open, okay? So I'm just going to follow along my whole bottom edge like this, matching up the raw edge of my fabric to this high place here in my lace. And when I get to the other side, folding in twice the edge so it's at the same distance as the folded edge, okay? Then when I'm going to go stitch it, I'm going to basically be aiming from the top of this little bump right here, which is about 1/2 inch in from my raw edge, from the top of this to the top of that, and just kind of follow it across. That's going to give me a hem of about 1/2 inch, which is going to give me lace hanging down about like that, which is actually quite a bit. Not sure. I'm not sure if that is too much. All right, I've got that pinned on up here, but I'm just playing with a scrap to see what I want my finished look to be. The way I had it pinned, in my initial way of stitching it, I was going to have that much exposed, which is beautiful, but it seems like a little bit more than I actually want. So I'm thinking if I move it to this position, that's going to work a lot better for me. That's going to end up giving me a hem of about 1 inch, which is also pretty good for this fabric. So knowing that I want basically this point on my lace to be my line of stitching, okay, looking at my fabric here that I have all pinned on, if I have it on my sewing machine like this, I am going to be sewing at this level, okay? And that sounds good to me right now. I'm just going to start. I'm gonna put my mark where I need to start with a little bit of chalk, just so I have something to start with. But then just kind of following it to this little top area of this little piece of lace all the way across so it stays symmetrical until I get to the other side, okay? I've got it sewn on, so where that stitching line is, I'm making that the bottom edge of my hem, okay? So I'm just kind of getting that flattened out, and then my first step is just to iron it so it's folded at that point, okay? And then, like you can see, I already started right there. This little extra bit that's sticking out, I'm just going to tuck that under, okay? And pin it as I go all the way across here, because I am going to come back and have to stitch this hem down on the top. Actually, I've decided that what I'm going to do is actually whip stitch this hem by hand, but in addition to just turning it up once, I'm turning it under again so that I get a hem that's going to look like this on the inside. But doing that, where there's a thick seam allowance and stuff, that's going to get awful thick. So, because I don't want a huge amount of thickness right here, what I'm going to do is come in, well, just double check before I go cutting everything. This top part up here, I'm going to be cutting off, actually the inside hem, I'm going to be cutting off a lot of it, okay? So coming in, all right, so I am leaving it folded under about 1/4 inch and above this stitching line about 3/8 of an inch on this outside edge. And this lace shouldn't take up that much room, so I'm not really going to worry about it too much. But with that folded in, I know it looks about the same, but it feels a lot thinner just having this taken out of it, okay? So just get that pinned in place. Now, where there's a regular seam allowance like this, on the inside, so here's my stitching line right there. I'm going to come in, clip it up to almost 1/8 of an inch from that stitching line, and trim out this seam allowance this way, okay? Because that is also going to eliminate a lot of bulk. So that's what it's looking like. There's my stitching line. That's all the stuff I've cut out. So that when I fold it under like this, it's going to feel a lot flatter, okay? So that's how I'm going to do it. Once I have it all pinned in place, I'm going to press it real quick and then go downstairs with a needle and thread, pop on something saucy to watch, and get this whip stitch down, and then I'll be back up here, and really all we'll need to do is do the front buttons and hem up the sleeves. Hello and welcome to the next day. So I want to show you what I'm doing. I've got my skirt hemmed over there, and I did not have enough lace like this to do both sleeves. I was short by about that much, which, you know, I was looking around my room, and I'm still in the midst of cleaning up from, you know, wedding-ish projects. And I had a bunch of scraps of other lace and a bunch of satin buttons that I had cannibalized off of something. Here's one, and I decided, you know what? I'm going to use that stuff. I like lace, so let me get the tea leaves off of there. But I'm going to have a bunch of little satin buttons that I'm going to use up the front, and lace, oops, that I'm going to be using on the sleeves. But it's not ready yet. It looks like one of my tea bags burst, but that's okay. I wash it. Once I pull it out of here, I will rinse it off really good until the water's clear, and sometimes I'll wash it, sometimes I won't with soap. But, you know, I just put it in. You can see, I think it's going to be fun. And if all of this extra lace is not your cup of tea, then don't do it. But for me, I really feel like it. So I can't do this right now, obviously, because I need to let this sit. I've got an appointment in town I need to run into. But when I get back this afternoon, I'm going to finish up the front buttons and the sleeves with its pretty little lace appliques. Alrighty, it is later on the same day, and I'm just playing with my lace to see what I want to do. And right now, what I've got is just a strip just kind of pinned to the bottom. This is the very center armhole seam right there, so that's not going to be terribly visible. And I'm thinking I'm going to start with something like this. I just have a regular little 1 inch turned under and stitched kind of hem going on there. But I think that that's nice and bright. This is the color that my buttons turned out, and I think that they're going to blend really well. I like that. So I'm just going to get this pinned on. I'll probably just whip stitch it on by hand. That would be easier than trying to work around this on my machine. And I will be back up later on, hopefully with both of my arm sleeve seams, hems all done and laced up. And then I have a lot of this left. I'm not sure if I'm going to use it on this project or if I'm going to save it for something else. I will figure that out after I'm done with this. Okay, so good morning and welcome to another day. This is the never-ending project. There's my sleeves. You know, it's kind of fun. Here's the thing. Yes, this is a different kind of lace than this is, but you know what? It's my project, and technically there are no rules. If you want to live in a sewing room where there's certain guidelines that you adhere to, such as only one kind of lace on a garment, or only, you know, no spots with stripes and things like that, that is up to you. You can make your own guidelines, and that is perfectly fine. I'm just kind of stepping outside of that box this morning, and I kind of like it. It's brighter, but it's fun, and I like lace. And I don't think there's a real problem with that. So now I need to get my buttons put on. And I have 15 of these little buttons, which may be way too many. And I'm going to need to put my buttonholes down this side. And so I'm toying with the idea of just placing them based on the plaid. And so I do need one up here at the very top because that's where the elastic is. But if I center them with the plaid like this, that's going to be a lot of buttons, but I kind of think it's cool. So I'm going to go ahead and place them all the way down and see how many I actually have, if there's enough. And if so, I think I'm going to go with that plan. Now, oh yeah, it does. It comes all the way down to the last two. I'll have this space open down here, but that's fine. I think that's okay. That's down at my knee level anyway, so I'm good with that. So they're all going to be vertical, up and down, and they are all going to be centered at the very center of each of these squares. So that's pretty cool. Now, as far as their placement, if this section is 3/4 of an inch, half of that is 3/8. So if I move my ruler over, so I have 3/8 of an inch showing, and get a pen and draw it down, that's going to be the track of my buttonholes. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw that line like that all the way down, so that everything's going to be even that way. I did change my mind. My top buttonhole is going to be horizontal, and that is because of the amount of thickness that I have going in there and everything. So I'm going to center that right about here and put a line going straight across. These buttons, they're smaller than a 1/2 inch, but they're very thick, so I think if I use a 1/2 inch buttonhole cog on my buttonholer, that will work. And so if this is going to be 1/2 inch, I'm going to need it to start right about here where I put that line. Okay, so for every buttonhole I'm going to have a starting point crosshatch and a track. So this one is going that way. For the rest of them, I'm going to be centering them on the little plaid. So if this point right here is the very center of that plaid, and I line that up at a 1/4 inch point, which is 1/2 of a 1/2, I can see that this is the top most point. Okay, right here. And so I'm just going to go ahead and on the rest of this light color plaid, put that same top point, So if here's the center part of that stripe, there's one little blue line and then the next one above it, okay? Then I'm finding the starting point on my darker colored, and I'm just going to repeat that same position on all the darker colored ones all the way down. Okay, so I've got them all marked. I need to go ahead and get my machine set up for the buttonholes, and I used my 201 machine because my buttonholer is already over there and it fits well. Let me get that set up and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so this is my 201 and that is my buttonholer. I'm going to be using her to put all of these guys on. I'm not going to show you me using her because I have many times in the past, but just wanted to introduce you, and I will be back up at the table as soon as all those buttonholes are put in. Right now I have ironed it after I sewed my buttonholes on, so my little marks are gone, and I just do them one after another, so I'm clipping my little threads between them here. I am going to use my little chisel buttonhole cutter because it's right about the right size for a 1/2 inch buttonhole, and I just feel like it. So if you're going to use one, you need either a little piece of wood. I have this thick old Leatherman holster thing that you can tell. I've been using that. You can also use my coaster. And I'm just going to pop it down into each little hole. Okay, so that's gonna push the little blade all the way through, and then make sure I don't have any little loose threads that are gonna get me hung up in there, so I can pull out all of this stuff, that kind of stuff, you know, that's annoying, and clip it off. And then let's test it out with a button. And I think that that's pretty good, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and open up and clean up all of my little buttonholes here. It's these threads, these lengthwise ones, you know, the ones that make it a pain to use new buttonholes. I just want to clear those out while I'm sitting here with my scissors all nice and handy, okay? Thought I would mention while I'm doing this, it may seem like a lot, and I basically have a button and buttonhole every 2 inches, which could be a pain in the neck to use every time you're going to get dressed, but this has such a large waist that I'm thinking once I have it buttoned, I can just pull it over my head and not really have to button and unbutton it. I'm thinking these are actually going to be more decorative than anything. So just thought I would point that out really quick. Okay, so now that I have all of my buttonholes cut open, I'm going to get the other side here. And I need to get ready to mark where my buttons are going to go. So again, this space between my stitching line and the edge should be about 3/4 of an inch, which is going to make the midpoint 3/8 of an inch. So just like before, I'm just going to draw that line, that midpoint line in all the way up, so at least they'll be lined up this way. Okay, so I've got that line drawn on, and here's my buttonhole side. Here's my button side, and I'm just going to draw a little crosshatch where the center should be. So on the light colored squares, I guess, the center point is very obvious, and since I was lining up the buttonholes with that, it's going to be easy to see, so I'm just drawing that straight across. Don't think there's one on the bottom. Okay, for the darker one, it's a little bit trickier to see that midpoint, but there is a light colored thread that goes through. But at the same time, I want to line my buttonholes up so that I can just eyeball where the midpoint of that one is, right here. Keeping my plaids lined up all the way down, and so on and so forth. So then it's just a point of getting a needle and thread. I need to pull the old threads off the back of these and get these sewn up all the way down wherever I have that little X mark. Okay, so sorry about that. It is so hot and humid out here. I think my camera keeps fogging up. Here it is. It's comfortable. Plenty of room to pull it over my head so I won't have to button and unbutton these. It's basically a glorified house dress, but 100% cotton, breathable, you know. But the main part of this whole video for this dress was taking a pattern that I didn't like, tearing off those parts that really annoyed me, and using the pattern to make something with what I had, with fabric that I had in hand, to make something that I would wear. And I think that I achieved that, you know. It's a little dress. It's what it is. I could wear it in the winter, I could wear it in the fall, I could throw leggings under it, I could put a turtleneck under it, I could do whatever. But for right now, it is just hot and humid and steamy. So I'm just celebrating the looseness of it and the 100% cotton of it. So anyway, there you go. I know that it was a little bit different than my normal videos, but I hope you liked it. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Living my bucolic life, free of the city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and some spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.